Dr. Jazz.
But cool.
Dr. Jazz.
Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. I've spoken, I think, to almost everyone you played with like lately.
Well, all right.
But
No secrets left.
yeah, no, yeah, kind of. No, but I'll just dig in. I was so happy, that I saw that you have a new record coming out like in 1 month, right?
Yeah, October 20th. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one track available to listen. I listened to it as well, and it sounds beautiful. The arc, how you compose the tune like in over 9 minutes. And but I wanted to ask you to start this talk with this new album. What's the story behind it? Is that like a new band also? Because it's and how did you approach this one? I mean, the instrumentation and
Yeah. So this new album is called Shimmer Wince, and it's a new quintet that is myself on the obvious, I guess. Trumpet. Mariel Roberts plays cello. Elias Stemeseder plays synthesizer, and Lesley plays drums. And basically, the reason for me starting this band was well, I guess maybe I'll back it up a little bit more. So I got this grant or fellowship in like 2019 to go to the American Academy of Berlin. And in 2019, I was awarded this fellowship, and it was for 2021, which, seemed like it would be a good time in the future. Didn't know about the pandemic yet. So when I'd applied for this fellowship, I'd said that I wanted time to research just intonation. So for anybody who might not be familiar with just intonation, basically the tuning system that we tend to use in the Western world is called equal temperament, which is allows us to play in all 12 keys, but it's a bit of a compromise from the natural resonances of strings and objects. Anyway, so I'd been kind of like flirting with just intonation stuff for a little while and checking it out sort of in a pretty non-studious way, I would say, for a long time. And I wanted to get deeper with it. So when I applied for this grant, I applied to like just go and not write music. I was just going to do research, which I felt like at the time, like I was just so busy with playing and performing and composing when I needed to compose. I never really had time to just sit and like research and learn new things. So anyway, I applied for this thing to just have time to research. Anyway, then the pandemic hits, and everybody sort of had nothing but time.
yeah.
But it was also a little bit more complicated than that, obviously, because we were also all very sad, and there was a lot going on. But anyway, so by the time I got to 2021, I actually really enjoyed having this time of research, even though it was, I'd sort of had nothing on the books for a while. I think it was sort of good. It breathed some life into what was a pretty hard time. So I was at the American Academy of Berlin for 3 months in early 2021 and researching just intonation, and it wasn't like a super academic research path. I would say I was kind of partially just kind of listening to a bunch of stuff and checking out a bunch of scores. I had access to like basically any score that was available in a library in Germany at that time, and was just writing down my thoughts about music that I was listening to, and reading some academic text, reading some non-academic text, just kind of getting my hands on a bunch of different types of approaches to different tuning systems, mostly stemming from just intonation world. And the goal was to not to like become an expert in it per se, but more to like check it out and see how maybe it could be applicable in my own work.
Okay.
So to find some like things that I could take from it and things that would be useful for me as a composer. I think when I started talking about this, a lot of people wondered if I was going to start writing drone music or you know, and that was never my intention. It was always like, no, how can I actually incorporate this into the music that I want to write, which is not drone music mostly. Though it's not like I'm opposed to it. It's just more, that's not what tends to come out when I start writing. And also, like, not just that, but playing with musicians who may not be super versed in that world, because I want to continue to work with improvisers. That's super important to me. Both so may not be versed in like notational practices of it specifically, because a lot of people play with different tuning stuff and their work on their ears in different contexts. And I think when you get into the history of just intonation, there's a lot of historical jazz recordings even that where people were obviously hip to a lot of this stuff. But I guess that's sort of a really long backstory to say that I was researching this, and I knew that I wanted to write music. I knew that I wanted to write music for a new band, and I was thinking about who that could be. And I wanted to write for a brass instrument because brass is built on the overtone series, which is what just intonation is. And Adam O'Farrell and I have worked together a lot over the years, and he's just one of these people that I feel like we have a really the like trumpet tenor thing is, I feel like it's really deep. And when you find like the trumpet players that you really connect with, I think that's it's just like a nice, it just feels so good. So I knew I wanted to play more with Adam. So I wanted him in the band, and also I knew that he was interested in tuning stuff and had checked out like a lot of different things, and I knew that he would be down to practice all this stuff. And then Mariel is somebody that I've, she's deep in the new music world circles and is actually pretty versed in this just intonation stuff as it comes from like the new music perspective. So I knew that she would bring a lot of like authority and previous knowledge to the group. Plus she's a great improviser, and I seem to be drawn to writing for cello recently, so that made sense. And then Elias Stemeseder is somebody I've known he's like one of my closest musical collaborators over a long period of time. And I wanted somebody who would be interested in retuning a synthesizer and figuring out how to retune a synthesizer to really specific pitches. So I asked Elias, I knew that he was into it. I knew that he had a really close friend in Austria who's Georg Vogel, who's like really into building a bunch of different types of instruments. And that Elias had been chatting about just intonation with him. And so I knew that Elias's interests lined up with this project pretty specifically. And then, Lesley's just a drummer that I guess I had improvised with her a few times, and I played in her band, and was just interested in kind of like finding a deeper connection with her too. So it was just a bunch of people that I was interested in working with more for different reasons. And it's been a really fun band to put together. And because of the nature of the music, I really wanted to have a lot of rehearsal time before we recorded and performed. And so it was a group of people that actually really bonded over the course of the year. We sort of rehearsed for a year before we recorded this music, which is, obviously not really the norm.
Man, no.
Like maybe a couple days before you record music. Anyway, so I felt really grateful that all of these folks were willing to put in that sort of time. And so that's sort of the history behind the music. It's basically just me exploring just intonation within my compositional world, and I kind of approach it from a few different pathways. Each of the pieces is written in sort of a different tuning system within that, and I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited for this band to play more and to get this music out into the world.
I mean, I think live this is gonna be a killing group. If you get a tour together next year, or it's like, because all of you are amazing improvisers as well, so it's so much space there to
it's gonna be fun.
You said when compositions come, but I always seen you like as an amazing composer, and you played with a simple trio, you know, with two of my favorite players like John and John Hollenbeck and Matt Mitchell, and how do you? What's your story when you sit down and start composing? I mean, do you have like a sketchbook of ideas, or basically where you're gonna go with a composition, or how do you like schedule a composition process for an album, basically?
I don't know, it's a little chaotic. Well, no, I mean, okay, so I guess like in general, yeah, I keep a little sketchbook of ideas.
Okay.
I've been trying to just sort of, especially when I'm on the road, or maybe don't have time to like have a really steady long compositional practice, just to keep it going and to be sketching ideas while I'm performing or traveling or whatnot. So I do keep a sketchbook of ideas, both like musical ideas and also maybe, or like, specifically musical ideas, such as like melodic ideas or rhythmic ideas, but also, some things that are maybe more like form based, or just like a conceptual world that I'd like to dip into a little bit. And then, when I sit down to actually write the music, I guess it's, usually just hours of pain of, trying to just trying to find the ideas that work. I mean,
good. I'm happy.
I've
I'm happy you said that. No, I'm kidding, but like,
well, no, I mean, I think it's important to talk about that, because I think a lot of people sort of assume that it's easier, just flows naturally or something like that. But really, it's usually a lot of slow, hard work that just feels like, sometimes you're not moving forward. But I think just I operate under the philosophy that any time that I'm spending focusing on music, whether it's if I'm sitting at my desk writing music, even if I'm not getting notes down on the page, as long as I'm conceptualizing compositions and thinking about like the world of the music that I'm writing, that work is getting done. And I mean, I guess it depends. Like with the Simple Trio, for example, it's a band that I've worked with for a long time and played with John and Matt in a number of different contexts outside of that band too. And so often I just have the sound of their sounds in my ears so strongly that maybe there's something that I'm just like, oh, that would that would sound really cool to do. There was a piece that I wrote recently for Simple Trio where I had this little saxophone idea, and it was sort of cool on its own, and then I was just like, oh, actually, like that would sound really, I could hear John's sound sort of doubling it, and that was like what sparked the composition, was me thinking it wasn't just the saxophone idea, but it was that combination. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I try to improvise my way into pieces, on my own instruments, and that often is sort of separate. Like I'll set aside time during my practice time to just maybe like record some little ideas, or to try to come up with some things, and maybe, okay, I came up with that idea, like, are there a few different ways that I could expand upon that motif? But sometimes it's just sitting with manuscript paper and a pencil and just trying to like maybe I look at my sketchbook and see what could be elaborated on, and come up with some ideas. There's not really any sort of magic sauce that I apply to make pieces.
No, I know, but it's like, how do you know when a tune is finished? Like, I have problems sometimes with this, sometimes I tend to override it, that it's too long, or I don't know. It's like, how do you do that? I mean, how do you know when it's over, that it's enough, actually, I'll put it like that?
Yeah, well, I edit a lot.
Okay.
I always revise, I always edit. I would say that I stop after a certain point.
Okay.
But I think like I'll write a piece, and then once I hear it played, or maybe I'll show it to some people, and then usually from there I revise and I edit, and I try to make it just as concise as possible. I would say that overwriting is in general a better problem to have than underwriting, because it's easier to pull stuff out.
Sure.
It's easier to pull stuff out of a composition, even if it's painful and it hurts you, and you're like, but I really like that idea. It's really easy. It's a lot easier to just like highlight, delete, or whatever you're doing then to come up with a whole new section.
Yep.
But I guess I try to just like whatever ideas I had starting a piece, whether it was formal or conceptual or whatever, if I've really stuck to that in the execution of my ideas, but then when I actually get into the composition, I realize like, oh, it doesn't need all of that. It's much too long. Like,
yeah.
At what point does it become boring? What can I take out and still leave like that core? So I just I'm pretty hard on myself, I would say, when I'm editing. I really don't stop until it feels like until it feels like I like every part of the piece, which I think is a thing that it seems so obvious, but I think it's also just like kind of not that obvious when you're in the middle of composing. I think a lot of people, and I think this is also my impulse too, is just like there's a thing that you kind of just left in as a placeholder and like, whatever, it's fine, but you don't actually like it.
Yeah.
And you just kind of deal with it. And then it's just as part of the piece, and every time it comes around, you're like, So I guess I just try to be really hard on myself and to get rid of those, or not even get rid of them, but like what can I do with that how can I make this something that I like? In terms of like when it's done, I mean, I think I also try to not revise endlessly, just for the sake of like having a band that is working, and having like not anytime you give people new music for a given composition, you're opening up the door for somebody having the wrong chart on the gig. They'll bring an old version, and that's certainly happened to me. It's happened to me recently even. But I think I try to, like, once I've sent out the music, as a final version, like that's sort of that. And there's edits that I will do later. There's sometimes edits that I do, like we'll play it live a few times and realize like, oh, this is actually kind of cooler. Or like when I'm editing for recording, I'll be like, actually this works and this doesn't work, and then maybe I'll like kind of write that into the piece. But I would say I try to revise a lot and to try to make it as good as possible before I send the music to the band.
Yeah.
And then once it's in the hands of the band, I try to not be super overbearing.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Like, I listen to Idiom like a lot. I love the tunes there, and like, the record starts like with Idiom 1, which for me it's like that 7/4 thing, and then that Matt thing kind of, it's like, what is happening now? Like two questions here, like do you write out drum parts, like, or do you, like, let's say for simple trio, or just give the tune to John and then he kind of makes up his magic? Or, and the second thing connected to John, I mean, how important was he to your music? Because I hear a lot of rhythm, the importance of rhythm in your music, and it's like, obviously, I studied John's music so much, like Claudia Quintet and all that, and I played with him, and he's a monster composer. So it's kind of like two questions, I mean, related to this.
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. John's music is super important to me and to my music, and I studied with him sort of. I mean, I guess I kind of met him like a little bit before this, but I did a master's degree of jazz in Berlin while John was still there, and a big reason that I wanted to study there was because John was there. And so I'd like composed music before that, but I think John really taught me how to be a composer, sort of capital C, and how to also just like in many ways gave me license to spend the amount of time on compositions that the compositions needed to have. And so, I mean, I've checked out his music a lot, and maybe even more so than that. I did copy work for him for a number of years, so I spent a lot of time.
Okay, wow.
I spent a lot of time in his compositions, like, basically editing things for people to play them. So I would say that's just that was a big learning thing for me too. It was just kind of like, maybe it was kind of a job, but it was also score study in many ways.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I learned so much from John, and I am not surprised when people say that they hear a connection between my music and his music, for sure. I mean, and that also obviously is linked to the fact that he is in my band. So
yeah.
so there's that too. But in terms of writing out drum parts, I sometimes do.
Okay.
And I sometimes don't.
Okay.
I would say my drum parts are pretty like remedial in many ways. Like I know how to write for drums, like I know the basics, but I also know that drums are an improviser's instrument, and that almost anything I write, every drummer is going to be able to play something cooler than that, like in 2 seconds. So I would say my drum parts are kind of like, hey, here's an idea,
Direction.
maybe go from here. But you know, I often just write like cymbal, snare, bass, drum, and I kind of have that written out. And I try to really, I think about my drum parts a lot, whether I'm writing for John or anybody else. Just like what is going to get the best results? You know, is it actually having a written out drum part, or is it maybe just, you know, giving here's what the piano is doing, here's what I'm doing, here's what somebody else in the band is doing, if, you know, it's a larger group. I try to just, I give it a lot of thought and try to think of, like, from the drummer's perspective, what do they want to hear? What do they want to see? So yeah, I think in idiom 1, often it's just kind of like bass rhythmic notation. You know, in the 7/16 part, like da 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 da. But then sometimes they give like just a shape, you know, like a contour, like it's 16th notes, but it goes up and then down, like that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how that piece goes in the drum part. I think it's not like a lot of cue notes. I think it's a lot of just like kind of rhythmic stuff. I might have given him like some piano or flute cue notes on top of it. But I also try to make things concise too, because I think, like, you know, often drummers, it's almost like a score, like having the score is the most useful thing, but then you have like 20 pages on your stand, and nobody likes that either. So
no, sure. No, but I agree. Like, if you have an amazing drummer, I mean, it would be a sin to write out drum parts. I'm always like, damn. Like,
I mean, I think having
something really specific. I mean, that's
totally. I mean, especially not being a drummer, I think I have a basic idea usually, and then I can get the basic idea down, and then just be like, please don't actually play this, but you know, use this as a place to start from.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, I wanted to go a little bit back also, Anna. Like, what was your, you know, we talked about Hollenbeck and all these guys, but like, what was the main impetus for you to dive into improvisation and jazz? Like, when you were, I guess, a teenager, or when was that moment? That was a record you heard, or?
That's a good question. I went to a high school with a really strong music program, and all of the better players were in the jazz bands. So I wanted to be in jazz band, but I played flute. I didn't play saxophone yet. So I wasn't sure I could be in the jazz bands, and I played some piano too. So for a while I was like, maybe I'll play piano in the combo. Anyway, I just kind of like, I fell into it because I was serious about music, and that seemed like an interesting thing to do. And then playing in a small group also was fun. And I just really, I really enjoyed it. And I think I was maybe like, I had a little bit of talent. I don't think I was that talented, but I think I had just enough where it wasn't like embarrassing for me to to improvise. And I think a big thing was that when I was in, I forget which grade it was, but either my second to last or my last year of high school, there was a bunch of students who were a year younger than me who were really excited about jazz. And I started playing with them, and they were like listening to all these records. They were just into it in a different way than I was, or than like the people in my grade level were. And so once I started playing with them, I think that enthusiasm kind of really rubbed off on me. And yeah, we just, we would get together outside of school and practice. We'd like rehearse in school, and then we'd get together outside of school and practice, and we'd like listen to music together. And it was like a really formative experience to be playing with those guys. And out of that group, there was 5 of us, and 3 of us are still professional musicians.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is, kind of cool. We're all in different worlds, but we're all still playing. Yeah, and then I guess like I'd always thought that studying music in college was a bad idea, because you were supposed to go to college to study something that you could make a living with. And then I guess there was a couple things, like some people came to my high school and said like, hey, listen, if you have a backup plan, if music is your backup, or like if you want to study music but like you have a backup plan of something else, like if you're studying music and medicine or something, like you will take that backup plan. Like you're not
it's less risky kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that kind of landed in my brain, and then I did a summer jazz program after I graduated from high school, and it was really kind of there that I was like, I think this is really the thing that I want to do. And I think I talked to my parents about it at the time, and I remember my dad telling me like, well, why don't you want to study music in college? Like I think I just had this thing that maybe I thought I was getting from my folks, that said like, hey, you should go into the sciences or the arts or something. And but I think it actually wasn't. I think I just sort of superimposed it on whatever I thought a life trajectory should be. But anyway, I think I just got permission to then go and study it, and I ended up just majoring in music. And I think it was I really just, I felt like I was quite good at a lot of stuff in high school, and I don't think I was as good at music, but I think that I felt like because I wasn't as good, that there was room for growth for the rest of my life. And that felt like that was really exciting, that I could kind of like, there was endless possibilities of stuff to work on.
Yeah, in jazz, I think especially, I mean, it's like, since it's connected to improvisation, I think it's like endless what you want to explore, right? I mean, I love it.
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
What about you finding your voice? When I hear you play, obviously it's connected so strongly to your compositions, but I immediately recognize your sound and the way you play. Like, how did you
that's nice to hear.
Yeah. How did you establish that? I mean, did you go like to players in history also? Like, did you have phases when you studied a particular saxophone player, or?
Oh yeah, totally. I just did this recording like 2 weeks ago with Joe Morris and Matt Shipp.
Really? Oh man. Oh, beautiful.
Improvised trio. It's really fun. And Matt was just like, who are your people? Who are your horn players? And I was like, I realized like the people that I see as my like primary inspirations, I think are people that not a lot of people would think are my primary inspirations. Maybe that's not true, but like Warren Marsh for me is
okay. Yeah. Okay.
Top, totally top. And like Lee Konitz, of course, as well, and Lester Young, Mark Turner. That whole world is super important to me. That kind of lineage. And also Wayne Shorter is huge. Joe Henderson. I mean Coltrane. I love. I think like I really studied a lot of jazz saxophone players, like really
Interesting. Wow.
jazz guys. And I think I got into like maybe the more avant-garde world a little bit later. And I was always sort of interested in playing that like less straight ahead music, but
Yeah.
I think I think in retrospect, actually having really studied the like jazz saxophone players get in a different, like I wanted to do that, gives me a perspective on kind of playing more avant-garde music that I think maybe that's helpful in having a sound. I don't know. I can't really speak to like how that came about, but I do feel like when I'm playing free music or improvising in a free context, I'm thinking a lot about harmony. Which is also not really something I don't really do that anymore either. Like I'm not really a tunes player. But I think it's really a big part of my playing and a big part of my sound is having come from that tradition.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, yeah, so some of the players you mentioned, I would not, connect.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, I figured.
Cool. Yeah. But did you go like through a standards phase as well? Like prior?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, again, would not, but still when you moved to New York, I mean, I wanted to ask you like this story, like when moving to New York and deciding to do that, how was that for you? Like, being this overwhelming experience, I guess, and the first musical connections that happened in New York.
Yeah, well, I moved to New York to do a master's degree at Manhattan School of Music.
Okay.
So that was
a
nice way of doing that, especially because I'm Canadian, so I needed like a visa to go to New York, which everybody who's not American is usually familiar with that aspect of of the US. But I was like, okay, well, I want to be in New York. How do I do it? School seemed to be like sort of an easy way of getting that visa. So I think going to school gives you a kind of instant group of people that you're surrounded with, that you're kind of like making music with, and a good way of like you sort of have a couple years to settle into the city. You don't feel like you have to find a job immediately or be like trying to get all the gigs immediately. So I feel like I was able to settle in a bit of a slower way than maybe if I had just moved without going to school. And yeah, I mean, I think I connected with a lot of the people at Manhattan School really strongly, and a lot of those people are some of my closest friends still, but we're not necessarily playing together in a lot of groups. It was a relatively straight ahead jazz program. And I was certainly one of the weirder people in terms of musical tastes.
That's good. It's always good.
It was okay. I mean, I think I felt like it was a nice way of, I felt like I was really getting my straight ahead chops together. And then there was aspects of it that were a little frustrating for me. I remember just even like bringing in a piece to one of my ensembles and saying like, yeah, it's sort of got like a Paul Motion vibe. And the drummer was just like, I've never actually listened to Paul Motion. And
oh my God.
Wait, we're not even talking about like, Rashid Ali or, like anybody who's more like even like
obscure,
deep in the, I don't know if Rashid Ali is more obscure, but
not
just
obscure,
like more in the deep in the like free improv tradition. Yeah, I mean, it was sort of like, that was week one, at the school. So, but yeah, I mean, I think I kind of slowly got to know the scene and the people. And actually then after I graduated from school there, I went to, after you finish school in the US, you can apply for a year extension to your visa. It's called optional practical training. So I did that. I was just having a tough time making a living. And that's when I moved to Berlin. I was just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm having a hard time making a living. a bunch of my friends are German. They're moving back, so I went to Berlin for a year, and that was a really great way of kind of getting some perspective on New York and figuring out where I wanted to be connected and what I wanted to be doing. And then when I decided to move back, I sort of hit the ground running and kind of knew kind of exactly what I wanted to be doing, and I already had enough familiarity with the city and the people to make it happen.
Who are I mean, obviously, you played in so many groups, but who were the first connections you made to the musicians? I mean, when you came back from Berlin?
Yeah, me and Kate Gentile
Oh, yeah.
and Dustin Carlson and Adam Hopkins, who runs this label Out of Your Head Records. And there's like a crew of folks. We're all like about the same age, and we're all kind of like interested in similar music. Devin Gray, Nathaniel Morgan. I'm like gonna leave out somebody that's super important, and they're gonna see this and just be really offended. But yeah, there was, there was a bunch of people, and there was like a really nice house concert scene and some like cool little venues that we were all connected to, and we'd just get together and shed, and it was that was a really fruitful time.
Did you immediately started to lead bands like when you came back? I mean, when does your story with band leading begin, actually? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it sort of started in high school.
Okay.
To be honest, I always had band. And then I was a jazz flute major in my undergrad, and I kind of realized after a certain point, like, if I wanted to get gigs, I kind of had to make them happen, because nobody was calling a flute player for their bands. So I started like having my own bands and writing for them at that point. In terms of like the stuff that people are familiar with me for, I think that was when I moved back from Berlin. Well, when I was in Berlin, I started this band called Percussive Mechanics, and I have 2 records with Percussive Mechanics. That was kind of my project while I was doing this program in Berlin. Was I started that band, and then we ended up getting this deal with Pirouette Records. And we did a couple of we toured for a few years with that group, and that was really a great collaboration. And then I guess I also had been studying with John Hollenbeck in Berlin, and then when we moved back, I really wanted to do something with John, and was thinking a trio would be a nice thing to do, and was thinking, well, who would the third person be, and just kind of thinking about some options. And then I met Matt Mitchell. We did a session together and just really hit it off, and started chatting, and so I asked him to be in that band too, and that's kind of where Simple Trio started. So I guess I moved back from Berlin in 2012, and then we recorded the first Simple Trio record in 2013. So that was pretty soon afterwards.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I love that first one. It's I mean, all of the everything with the Simple Trio is so cool, because there's no bass, and it's like, obviously what Matt does, he's crazy. So it's
I know. I mean, in retrospect, there's not many other piano players I could have asked to be in that band.
yeah. It's like I did an interview like this, both with Kate and Matt.
And cool. At the same time, or you
no, differently.
Okay.
And then it's like, asking them about rhythm and their compositions, and I was like, man, okay, you guys are crazy, like insane. But yeah, Matt is like amazing player. Yeah, in this context, he works perfectly.
Totally.
Yeah. Otherwise, I wanted to ask you, like, how did you end up in Dave Douglas's group, that Engage project?
That's a good question. I don't know. Well, I guess I met Dave a long time ago. I did this program at the Banff Center for the Arts in Canada. When I was still living in Montreal, I went and did that. I think I'd finished school, but Dave was running it at the time. So I'd met him. That was probably in 2006 or 2007 or something like that. And then I guess Dave and I had been in touch because well, I was co-leading this big band with Angela Morris,
Mhm.
and Angela was doing some work for Dave, and we'd been talking with Dave about maybe putting out our big band record on his label on Greenleaf. Yeah, so I think maybe we were reconnected again through that. And then yeah, I was excited when he asked me to be a part of that project, the Engage project. But yeah, we hadn't, I guess maybe we played a little bit when I was at Banff, but it was really like a teacher student thing, and
Yeah.
it was really cool to be in a small group project with Dave for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
I like it because it's quite different than his other stuff. I mean, it's
Mhm.
I mean, obviously he's again one of those monster composers with
Yeah.
trillions of pages of music, which is
Yeah.
everything is so good, man. It's like
Mm-hmm.
but anyway.
Yeah, and it's such a, I mean, it's such a cool band too. With like,
Yeah.
I mean, Kate, obviously, now you know that we have a pretty long-standing connection, and then Nick Dunstan I'd been playing with a little bit. I think before then, we play in this Belgian drummer Rob Vertessen's group together, and then Tomika Reed.
Yeah.
I feel like we played together before that too, but you know, she's, yeah, it was just super great to improvise with her. And Jeff Parker I'd like known from Tortoise, you know, like
Oh man.
years and years ago, and I think there'd been maybe a couple other opportunities where we almost played together, and it was always really exciting, and then it didn't happen, and then so I was really psyched to get the chance to play with him.
Yeah, he's such
in
a
that project.
such
Yeah.
a good player. Really, he's
Yeah,
such a good
totally.
player. Really, I love his playing. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, Anna, not to take too much of your time. Like, what's on the schedule for the remainder of the year or 2024? Are you coming to Europe maybe by any chance with this group, or like, I mean, the record is coming out in October, so what are
Yeah,
the plans?
well, I guess I have a few things that are coming out this fall, which is sort of accidentally.
Really? Oh, okay.
Well, there's that. That's the big one for me. That's the one that I sort of have spent, you know, upwards
Yeah.
of a year and a half or something writing and working on.
Okay.
But Matt Mitchell and I actually just did a duo record.
Oh, wow.
For
Okay.
for Zodic, for John Zorn's label.
Beautiful.
And that was sort of, we've been talking about doing a duo thing for a long time, and just kind of never happened. And then Zorn asked us if we would like to do this thing for
Like
for
improvised
Zodic.
or compositions or both?
It's compositions.
Really?
But
Oh, okay.
it's
Super.
inhabits a pretty different world than like Simple Trio. Definitely very, very like little more like sketch type ideas on my side, and it's half my music and half Matt's music.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it came together really great. We're both really, really happy with it. So that's coming out, I think, in November. I haven't gotten a final date on that. And then another little duo record that I made with Weston Olenki. I don't know if you've run into them, but they're a Berlin-based trombone player, but we're based in the US. And we were sort of living pretty close together during the pandemic, and just like getting together and making sounds. And that's a pretty weird sort of like composed structures, but pretty free within
Oh, cool.
that. A lot of like
I'll check it
pretty
out.
like sound-based improvisation. That's coming out on Astral Spirits as a tape, I think in a couple of days. I think actually in 5 days, on September 22nd. So a few things that just sort of like happen to be coming out right around the same time, which is pretty cool. This band of John Hollenbeck's that I play in, George, is going to Korea.
Oh, wow. Okay. Amazing.
In early October. So that's cool. I'm excited about that. We're playing this festival called the Jerusalem Jazz Festival, which is almost certainly not how you pronounce it. And oh, I have a week at the Stone like next week. I don't know. I don't know when this is going to be released, but yeah, that's exciting. I've never had a Stone week before, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah, and then I'm going to be in Europe with Max Johnson in the beginning of November. I forget where we're playing, but
sure, super. I'll try to catch you if you're somewhere near. Cool.
Yeah, I don't even know. I'm sure the dates are posted somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing another Simple Trio recording at the end of the year as well.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
10-year anniversary recording. So I'm finishing up a bunch of music for that right now.
Beautiful.
And that's kind of through the end of the year, I guess. That's
Oh, that's a lot.
that's a lot, right?
Yeah. I think that's enough almost.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, beautiful, fantastic. Looking
Mhm.
forward to all these records. Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
totally.
Cool.
That it?
I'll let you go.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
thanks so much for having me on this.
yeah.
And let me, you know,
Thank you for taking the time, and I
of
appreciate it.
course.
Yeah.